So recently someone on Reddit said that my reviews have too much whining in them. I protest. I'm complaining, not whining. The difference is tone. When it comes to criticism of my work, I do take it in and I reevaluate my approach to things, or if it's not particularly constructive, I just ignore it. I've now been on YouTube long enough that my skin is fairly thick, but it did feel that this comment warranted some discussion because I disagree strongly with its very sentiment. First though, it is worth saying that I like G1 Transformers. I make fun of it because I feel connection with the material and it's familiar. It's kind of like poking fun at a member of the family. You know their faults and you like to tease, but you love them deep down inside. I mean, investing so much of my life to reviewing every episode of the show would be miserable if I didn't actually like it. But this guy was saying that the show is not worth criticizing because it was made for kids in the 80s. And I strongly disagree. I'm understanding that some of the problems are budget issues, which is why I don't really take off points for animation problems unless they're particularly outrageous. I prefer to tackle story issues. I dig into the storytelling and structure and say how these fundamentals could be improved because at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. And I reject the notion that kids' entertainment is beyond criticism. In fact, I feel the opposite. We should scrutinize kids' entertainment more because the media that they take in helps forge their minds. Their entertainment should have something to say, and don't tell me that it was different in the 80s, because I grew up watching kids' movies from the 80s. Secret of NIMH, Never-Ending Story, The Land Before Time. They're still some of the best kids' films ever made. Even The Great Mouse Detective holds up in what was seen as a low point for Disney animation. And yes, the budgets are different from TV to film, substantially different. But that's why, again, I just critique the fundamentals of storytelling, not the visual presentation. And I do grade them differently than feature films, but come on, kids aren't dumb. Don't treat them like they are. I once read a Roger Ebert review about a kid's film, and I'm paraphrasing, but it said, "Sure, it's harmless, but is it nutritious?" And that stuck with me. So if something is not worth critiquing, in my opinion, it's just not worth watching. So if I'm sitting here critiquing the Transformers, it means that I feel it's worth it. I feel this show is worth watching. It's a compliment, believe it or not. Obviously, the show has stood the test of time and still has its fans today. That must show its value. My hope is that I make these reviews funny enough that you'll go along for the ride. But okay, those are my thoughts. Now let's not waste any more time and jump right into the review. So welcome back to Iacon, everyone. Today we are going to talk about SOS Dinobots, where we introduce some characters that are pretty long-lasting as the series goes on. Of course, there's no mystery as to who that is, since the word Dinobots is in the title. The episode starts with Ironhide complaining that there's an earthquake, which is fair considering their base is buried in a volcano. Actually, he just thinks Decepticons are up to something because he's seen the show before. With some scans, he finds dinosaur fossils on the other side of the rocks, and Spike tells the Autobots about dinosaurs. At a museum, which thankfully they don't destroy just by being there, they get some scans of dinosaur skeletons. I actually like this bit about Autobots having to learn about things that humans learn when they're kids. The Autobots are foreign to Earth, so it only makes sense that they would have to spend time getting to know our history, or in this case, prehistory. Wheeljack in particular is interested in this dinosaur business, so he asks Optimus Prime if he can build some robot dinosaurs. Prime gives him the go-ahead, and he starts that new science project. And after whole minutes of hard work, he presents the Dinobots. They're bigger and tougher than your average Autobot, but also dumb as rocks. So here we are introduced to some Transformer mainstays, but currently only 3 of the 5 Dinobots that would be. There's Slag, Sludge, and most famously, Grimlock. They're more or less just mechanical machines that respond to basic commands without much thought of their own. At least until they go spazoid and start smashing up the Ark and tossing the Autobots around like they're toys. Great work there, Wheeljack. Maybe you should have kept them even more basic so that there wasn't any possibility of a rampage. But man, the Dinobots just trashed the place, including Teletran 1, who was just chilling there, minding his own business. They do manage to shut the Dinobots down with the sonic spanking, but damage done. Optimus Prime tells Wheeljack that he's a moron for doing that and he should go give his head a shake. Wheeljack is like, "I may be able to make them smarter."
"Well, you sure couldn't make them any dumber, could ya?"
He's ordered to never reactivate the Dinobots, so they stash their bodies on the other side of the cave wall and start to work to fix the base up. I feel like this was all avoidable. Not Wheeljack's finest hour.
Back to Iacon will return after these messages. We now return to Back to Iacon.
Meanwhile, the Decepticons decide it's been a good week since they've terrorized some humans, so they go to do just that. And while they're at it, may as well start sucking energy out of a dam because it's renewable and eco-friendly.
Next, we build windmills.
But Megatron, I've heard they cause cancer.
You're an idiot, Starscream, and whoever told you that is an idiot.
The Decepticons take over the power station with ease, and the people working there were unable to contact Teletran 1 on account of it being smashed by Grimlock. Starscream warns Megatron that the Autobots could come and mess their plans up because he's also seen this show before. But Megatron has a special plan for the Autobots if they come by. Hound and Spike are out doing some surveillance since Teletran 1 is being fixed, and chances are the Decepticons are up to something. Hound picks something up and determines that the Decepticons are at the dam because he can just kind of scan that. So they go back to the base to report, and Optimus puts together a team of everyone who isn't on timeout or repairing the base. So it's Ratchet, Wheeljack, and Bumblebee left behind. So the Autobots get to the dam and are like, "Where's the Decepticons?" Hound assures them that they're here, but no one could account for Megatron's master plan of hiding behind things and then popping out and attacking. Yeah, that was Megatron's plan. Hiding and then unhiding. Not to mention that after unhiding, he announces that they're there and ruin the element of surprise anyway. He just couldn't resist, could he? Astoundingly, this plan works, and the Autobots are defeated and swept up by the water. The Decepticons even make sure to gather them up and make sure that they're dead. I mean, you've got to hand it to Megatron. He knew to not just assume that they were dead.
Ha! I've seen enough James Bond to know that they aren't dead until you see it happen. And even then, we all remember you only live twice.
I find that one problematic.
Shut up, Starscream, they're all problematic.
Spike saw all of this go down, and Bumblebee shows up because, well, actually, I'm not sure. But it's good that he did, because now he knows to go back to the base and let Wheeljack and Ratchet know that everyone is in trouble. Of course, even between the three of them, they know that they're no match for all the Decepticons. I mean, what if they pop out from behind stuff again? There's no defense that can match that maneuver. The answer is clear. They need to wake up the Dinobots. Luckily, Wheeljack has been working on some intelligence upgrades and puts new brains into the Dinobots. So, now the Dinobots are smart enough to talk, and some basic who is who. They determine that the Autobots are the ones with the Autobot symbol on their chest, so there you go, kids. Branding really does work. The Autobots are all tied up and ready to be executed by firing range when the Autobots show up for a battle. They engage the Decepticons. Wheeljack shoots Megatron in the balls and he topples over. That's enough for Starscream to declare himself leader again. Man, the audacity of that guy. He'd throw a coup every time Megatron sneezes if he could. I actually find this hilarious though. Moments after Starscream decides he's the leader, he gets shot out of the sky by Grimlock. Serves him right. Basically, the Decepticons get a thrashing from the Dinobots, and Wheeljack releases the Autobots, and the bad guys retreat. Wheeljack and Bumblebee submit themselves to Optimus's judgment since they disobeyed his orders, so Prime pulls out his cannon and kills them on the spot for their betrayal. Oh, come on. Wheeljack has clearly watched this show before and knows that Prime's orders are more like recommendations. He even suggests certain wines to pair up with his orders, something that nicely complements the flavor. So Optimus commends them on their work and says that the Dinobots have proven their worth so they can stay online. I mean, I would hope so, now that they're self-aware and smart enough for basic problem solving. At this point, there's no going back, right? You can't just pull the plug, can you? Anyway, the Dinobots roar and everyone is happy. The end. SOS Dinobots is an important episode for the obvious reason. It introduces the Dinobots. These characters would be fan favorites through the series and would even play a major role in the theatrical movie. They would spend much of their time and would be associated more with their dinosaur modes rather than robot forms. The comics had a different origin story, where the Dinobots roamed the Earth while the occupants of the Ark were in stasis lock. That's a story for another day, but I actually prefer that story, though this one poses some interesting questions, mostly unintentional. Since it was written before the origin stories of the Transformers as a whole were laid out, the Dinobots make for an interesting contradiction to what we would find out about what brings life to the Transformers. We learned that the key to Vector Sigma would be the device that brings life to Transformers. Clearly, Wheeljack did something similar here. While the Dinobots aren't as intelligent as most Autobots, save for maybe Cliffjumper, most would argue that they're just as much alive as Optimus Prime. But do they have sparks? I don't really know. And does that make them essentially robots first and living beings second? These are the questions that come to mind from this, but that's with the gift of retrospect. The episode on its own is fine, if not a bit disjointed. It doesn't explore its issues as well as I think it means to. The lesson is that sometimes it's okay to disobey orders if you know that it's for the greater good and can genuinely help your comrades. But the setup is a bit flimsy. Wheeljack's story works well enough, but Bumblebee's story doesn't make that much sense to me. He's just told to stay and guard the base, which is a very reasonable order, but he disobeys it for no reason at all. It just so happens that it's the right thing for him to do for the sake of the plot, but there's no reason for it from his point of view other than maybe he was just bored at the base. It's not good enough, frankly. If you wanted a proper through line, maybe have a setup where Bumblebee screws up by leaving his post earlier in the episode, then Prime, when they have to go on the mission, tells him to stay at the base and he really means it this time. But something has to tip Bumblebee off that not all is well and it's an ambush, so he disobeys and helps the Dinobots save his friends. Then he has a nice little redemption arc and Optimus is like, we cool. It's more setup, and arguably more than there's time for in this story. But then the alternative is here, and just feels shoehorned into a story that should be about Wheeljack. So SOS Dinobots is 3.5 out of 5, an average outing of the Transformers that's important to see for the characters it brings into the fold. Now remember kids, give your robot experiments some basic common sense before you bring them to life, okay?